Now, if you were typing along with our last example, you probably noticed a couple of eyebrow raisers. And the first, of course, was that we would have to use text and list as we see here as imported from the typing module. Now, the next thing, of course, would have been that we were looking for a list in our gatekeeper, and we didn't have to have a list. We simply used gatekeeper as if it was text, which brings up the point I wanted to make, was that these are hits and are not enforced in any IDE outside of maybe giving us a warning in the best of them at the time of this recording. The next point I wanted to make, of course, was that we don't need typing at all. In other words, we could have simply used stir and list as well as list, and all would still be well. And just as importantly, of course, for those of you who were typing along would have noticed, if we didn't import anything at all from typing without using the qualifier, we would see that our tokens were invalid, and then we would have had to qualify our text definition, which I think most people would agree is pretty darned annoying, let alone arguably way too verbose. So given our choice between the three, of course, if you're like me, you'd probably just as soon avoid using typing, but knowing that you're going to see it will prepare you for the code created by others who like to use the module as well. So because we have a gatekeeper here that is a list, the opportunity is to notice that perhaps the creator of this code was thinking about something else, maybe having a list of gatekeepers. Now, why the heck would anybody want to have a list of gatekeepers? Well, as we run our program, of course, you notice that we have some wonderful class definitions, but wouldn't it be nice if we also had our function definitions listed in here as well? So if we're going to have more than one gatekeeper being detected, of course, all we'd have to do would be to iterate through the list. And all would be well. And since we're all coming back in order, we don't want to sort things anymore before we enumerate through our report. Changing our class to a list and including our function-defined block allows us to run our module so that everything is indeed listed and uniquely numbered for our report. Prettying things up a bit, we can check to see if the block starts with our def and maybe, I don't know, print a tab character on the same line to pretty things out a bit. Not too bad, and certainly a nice manifest of what's going on inside of our classes, and one that we could be using quite well so as to manage change. In other words, we have more functions or files so as to better detect whether we add a new class, for example, by saying we had this in our previous release and now we have n+1 or n-1, and we could talk about which difference we had. For example, block 123 was a short range scanner and now it's not. A very easy way to start your own AI for detecting change in our code bases. So, are you in the mood for a mission? One of the wonderful missions I think we might like to have is each file numbered and each function a dot sub number for our report. For example, rather than having all of our classes eccentrically numbered, in other words, going from 104 to 110, this would be class N, and this would be class N+1, and this would be N.1, .2, .3, .4, and this would be N+1, .1, .2, .3. Get the idea? That would be an amazing mission. It would take some time to think it through. So let's make that our next mission in our getting ready activity, and let's make it optional as well, because it is going to be a lot more complex than simply enumerating through our gatekeeper. Specifically, we're going to want to set up our logic a little differently. So each file is running to something that would list the structure of that file into our report, rather than simply listing the blocks for everything that we've seen from list files. In short, your mission, if you decide to accept it, is to create a list box functions in your study, or wherever you put your code, so as to list out our package and file name, something that was sorely missing from our previous demonstration, so as to sort our file names, and then list each and every one of the classes found in our file names, and then the functions underneath those classes in such a way, and this is the tricky part, so as to have each class maintain their proper order, so that we can see whenever we have more of the classes in each file, where we can go to look to find those classes, and more importantly, which files have neither a class nor a function to find them at all. Very handy, very interesting, and very usable. A tool that I'm quite certain you might want to have whenever you're taking a look at code bases. Certainly once you're looking at the ready mode. And we might even make it into a graphical user interface where we find our relationships and put things together into some type of presentation. We could probably even do it with the textual user interface for the version 1. And that's really the wonderful thing about getting ready to look at things. We can often go down rabbit holes, or bunny holes as we say, to find other products from our projects to help us do things like get ready to code by speedlunking through the legacy codes.